Hi everyone! Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The moon, a spectral fingernail, scraped across the velvet sky, drenching the woods in an unearthly luminance. Inside Meadowlight, Elara thrashed, a silent scream a prisoner behind her lips. It was as if a searing brand was being drawn through her essence, cleaving something intrinsic, something irreplaceable. Her fists knotted, fingernails drawing crimson half-moons in her flesh, sweat slicking her hairline. This was no typical lunar shift. This was torment, stark and visceral, emanating from her core. A place irrevocably linked to Kale. A gasp tore free, her frame shuddering violently. The tether! It was fraying, severing. The invisible silk that had entwined their souls was now unwinding, each snap a jolt of exquisite agony. Tears cascaded down her cheeks, a mingling of physical distress and the soul-deep sorrow of bereavement. Instinctively she reached, craving the familiar presence, a comforting warmth that had been her anchor, her constant. But only a hollow echo reverberated, a frigid abyss where Kale's spirit had flourished. Meanwhile, within the Ironwood borders, Kale occupied the Alpha's dais, hewn from primordial rock, pulsing with power under the lunar vigil. Addressing his assembled pack, his voice vibrated with command, amplified by the nocturnal stillness. Tonight marks a turning. The ancient precepts have served us, yet adaptation is survival. I will guide you toward a new dawn, a dominion of strength, an era of autonomy. A thundering chorus of approval answered him, a testament to his magnetism and the pack's craving for resolute leadership. However, a shiver ran beneath his skin, a subtle disquiet he ruthlessly suppressed. He dismissed the nagging premonition as whimsy, focusing on cementing his authority, proving his mettle. He steadfastly ignored the faint throb of discomfort, attributing it to simple exhaustion. He would brook no hint of frailty, not now, not ever. We will no longer be fettered by archaic custom, Kale continued, his tone unwavering. We will carve our own destiny, beholden to no other pack, answerable only to ourselves. He expounded on might, on supremacy, on the Ironwood heritage, everything but the linchpin he dared not address Elara. Back in Meadowlight, Elara dragged herself upright, her body a canvas of pain. The bond was almost entirely undone, leaving mere phantoms, spectral memories of what had been. An irresistible urge propelled her into the night. Towering trees surrounded her, their branches forming a cage of gnarled fingers reaching toward her. Moonlight sieved through the canopy, painting shifting patterns on the ground. Collapsing at the foot of an ancient oak, its coarse bark pressed into her. The ache was unyielding, but it was the emotional weight that threatened to crush her spirit. Why this rupture? Had she been deluded? Had the bond been nothing more than hopeful fancy, a fragile illusion? She recalled Kale's words, his disdainful dismissal of their connection. There is nothing between us. Elara, you misinterpret. His denial had wounded her, but she had clung to the faith that he was simply fearful, unwilling to expose himself, wary of anything that challenged his guarded image. Now, with the bond dissolving, she grappled with the possibility that he had been right. Had she been a fool to invest in something intangible, unproven? Had she allowed her heart to override sound judgment, blinding her to reality? The forest seemed to murmur her uncertainties on the breeze, eyes squeezed shut, tears coursing down her face yet again. She had entrusted him with her heart, her faith, her very being, and now he was ripping it away, leaving her with fragments and a heart heavy with anguish. As Kale brought his address to a close, nausea crested, leaving him momentarily unsteady. He swiftly regained control, attributing it to the intensity of the evening and the burden of command. He brushed off the concerned gazes of Rorik, his beta, with a brief nod. "I am well," he stated flatly, silencing any argument. "Ready the patrols. Secure the borders by sunrise." He turned and strode toward the Alpha's den, his mind ablaze with strategy. He had to demonstrate his worth, to both the pack and himself. He needed to prove his right to the title, his strength to lead. He pushed aside the lingering disquiet, the persistent sense of catastrophe, distractions he could not afford. Not now. Elara stood, battered but unbowed. The forest, a stoic confidant, offering no solutions, simply silent witness to her distress. She knew she could not remain submerged in sorrow. Somehow she must move toward the future, toward self-reliance, toward an inner fortitude. Kale's betrayal would not define her. The broken bond would not destroy her. Summoning resolve, she inhaled deeply, steeled against the reverberating pain. She would endure. She would rise above, more robust, more self-sufficient than ever. Turning toward Meadowlight, her footsteps echoed softly in the radiant night. The route ahead remained uncertain, but one she would traverse, head unbowed, spirit intact. Kale stepped into the Alpha's den, the weight of accountability pressing upon him. He regarded the Alpha's throne, sculpted from the heartwood of a venerable ironwood, a pang of unease twisting within him. He held the title now, but at what cost? Triumph felt empty, tainted by an inexplicable sense of forfeiture. Attempting to shrug it off, he reminded himself of his devotion, his pledge to the pack, yet the unsettling feeling lingered, an undermining doubt that threatened to erode his conviction. Seated at the Alpha's desk, he immersed himself in maps and reports, striving to lose himself in the minutiae of leadership. Still, his thoughts returned relentlessly to Elara, to the connection he had rejected, to the anguish he had dismissed. Guilt, he told himself. Responsibility for her well-being was all it was. But on a deeper level, he understood it was more. Deep in his heart, he knew he had erred. A catastrophic misjudgment, a price he now had to pay. As the first tendrils of dawn pierced the forest, casting elongated shadows, Elara stood on Meadowlight's porch, eyes fixed on the horizon. The acute pain of the shattered bond had receded, replaced by a dull throb, a constant reminder of her devastation. But beneath this surface sorrow, a new determination began to take root, the resolution to chart her own course, to command her own destiny. She would no longer be defined by her link to Kale. Elara Meadowlight was her name, and strength would be her banner. Kale, at the Alpha's den window, watched the sunrise ignite the heavens with blazing hues. A creeping sense of foreboding gripped him, a premonition of encroaching calamity. He knew, with chilling certainty, that his actions had unleashed forces beyond his command. His denial of the bond, his rejection of Elara, would now exact a toll. He did not yet fathom the scale, but in time he would learn that the price would be high. The price would be everything. Denial and deception, the great hall thrummed with a palpable unease. Ironwood banners drooped like defeated flags, mirroring the stifled atmosphere that followed Kale's pronouncement. Elara remained rooted to the spot, the phantom pain of the severed bond a visceral ache within her. She had braced herself for fury, perhaps even torment, but this calculated denial, was a far deeper wound. From the dais, Kale, his expression a rigid mask, scanned the gathered pack. His voice, magically amplified, resonated through the space. A misunderstanding has arisen. A certain claim has been made concerning a connection between myself and Elara Meadowlight. He paused, allowing his curt words to permeate the hall. Let me be unequivocal, he declared, his tone now edged with steel. There is no bond. There never was. Such whimsies are the domain of the feeble-minded, easily beguiled by emotion. As your alpha, I have no patience for such trivial pursuits. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the assemblage. Elara felt her face grow cold. She sought a flicker of regret, a spark of recognition in Kale's granite gaze. But there was nothing, only an implacable resolve. The Kale she had known, the confidant beneath the silvery moon, seemed to have been eradicated, replaced by this unyielding figure. A chorus of whispers erupted, a rising tide of disbelief and scorn. Faces swam before her, a sea of condemnation. Snatches of conversations, cruel barbs, pierced her like slivers of glass. Imagine fancying herself bonded to the Alpha, one voice sneered. Always had delusions of grandeur. Another, dripping with malice, hissed, trying to elevate herself. Pathetic. At the periphery, Lysander Blackwood wore a look of undisguised triumph, her sharp, assessing eyes locked with Elara's for a heartbeat. No compassion resided there, only the satisfaction of a battle won. She savored the moment, stepping forward to let her voice ring out. Perhaps Elara simply mistook mere infatuation for something more significant. We all know how easily the heart can mislead, particularly when it craves the unattainable. Elara winced, each syllable a blow. Her heart thrashed in her chest like a panicked animal. She longed to scream, to refute the accusations, to declare the veracity of their bond, but humiliation choked her. She was exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare before them all. Kale remained unmoved, his gaze sweeping over the pack, stifling the dissent with a single, commanding look. The matter is concluded, he stated. Let there be no further discussion. My priority remains the strength and security of this pack, and I will brook no distractions, especially those founded on falsehoods. He descended from the dais, his movements a study in controlled power. As he brushed past Elara, a fleeting, unintentional contact sent a jolt of pain through her. He offered no acknowledgement, no glance. He simply continued on his path, leaving her standing isolated in the hall's center, a social outcast. The pack began to dissipate, their gazes averted, their faces masks of awkward pity or blatant scorn. Elara watched them depart, her heart shattering into fragments. She had been exiled, branded a deceiver and a fool. The bond, formerly a source of strength and unity, had become her undoing. Weeks bled into one another, and Elara faded into a shadow of her former self. She shunned the great hall, taking sustenance in her chambers, the food devoid of flavor and appeal. She ceased training with the warriors, unable to endure their judging eyes. Even those she once considered friends now seemed to regard her with subtle derision, a silent indictment. Whispers pursued her relentlessly, a constant reminder of her public shaming. She caught them in the marketplace, on the training grounds, even in the solace of the forest. She struggled to ignore them, to block them out, but they were like insidious tendrils, snaking into her mind, poisoning her very thoughts. One dusk, seeking refuge in the familiar woods, she encountered Lysandra. The warrior stood squarely in her way, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with malice. "Well now," Lysandra purred, her tone dripping with false sympathy. Look what the cat dragged in. Still nursing your little fantasies, Elara. Elara halted, her fists balled at her sides. She had desperately avoided confrontation, but Lysandra appeared determined to break her. "Just leave me alone," Elara choked out, her voice barely audible. Lysandra's laughter, sharp and grating, echoed through the trees. "Why on earth would I do that? I'm simply concerned for your well-being. It must be dreadful, living in such a fabricated reality. Perhaps you should seek treatment. There are healers who specialize in our fabrications." "I know what I felt," Elara insisted, a newfound steel in her voice. "I know there was a bond." Lysandra's smile vanished, replaced by a look of icy rage. "You know nothing. You're a weakling, Elara. Always have been. You are incapable of grasping the burdens of an alpha, the sacrifices he must make. Kale is acting in the best interests of the pack, and you're just attempting to sabotage him with your pathetic inventions." "He's lying," Elara spat back, her eyes flashing. "He's lying to all of you." Lysandra surged forward, seizing Elara's arm in a vice-like grip. Elara gasped in pain. "Don't you dare speak of Kale in that manner," Lysandra hissed, her face close to Elara's. "He is our alpha, and we will obey him without question. You, on the other hand, are nothing. You're a disgrace to the pack, a blight on our honor." She shoved Elara violently, sending her sprawling. Elara landed heavily on the forest floor, winded. Lysandra loomed over her, her eyes blazing with contempt. "Consider this a warning," Lysandra snarled, her voice a low threat. "Keep your fantasies confined to your own twisted mind, or you'll face consequences you can't even imagine. Kale is destined for me, and I won't permit you to destroy his path with your fabrications." Lysandra wheeled around and stalked away, leaving Elara abandoned on the woodland floor, injured and devastated. The trees crowded around her, their boughs like skeletal claws reaching to claim her. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears coursing down her cheeks. The price of Kale's pride was her misery, her alienation, her very existence. And she questioned if she could ever unearth the inner strength to overcome it. Whispers of doubt, Elara bolted. Not toward the emerald heart of the woods, where ancient boughs cradled secrets and sunlight danced on the forest floor in shimmering mosaics. Not this time. The ragged edge of their territory beckoned the wild, exposed boundary where a keening wind clawed at the earth, and stunted pines clung to precarious existence on the cliff face. There, she might find purchase. A place to draw breath, her heart hammered. A frantic captive desperate to escape its bony confines. Kale's pronouncements reverberated, each word a sliver of glacial ice driving into her spirit. Deceiver. Delusional. Feeble. The pack's former curiosity, their burgeoning acceptance, had curdled into contempt and pity. Lysandra's gloating smirk was an indelible scar etched into her memory. She crumpled, the abrasive ground a sharp reminder beneath her. Good. Let it sting. Let the physical torment eclipse the gaping wound inside. Tears poured forth, etching clean streaks through the grime coating her cheeks. The wind, a callous hand, ruffled her hair. "Why?" she breathed, the sound swallowed by the wind's cry. "Why deny us this? Why deny this?" Her hand pressed against her sternum, where a faint, pulsing warmth, the remnants of the bond, clung stubbornly to life, a dying ember refusing to yield. Days dissolved into blurred nights. Elara drifted, lost in a fog of desolation and disbelief. Appetite vanished. Sleep offered no solace. Even the forest creatures, typically skittish, gave her a wide berth, sensing the fractured state of her soul. She relentlessly practiced her shifting, pushing past her limits. Yet, the wolf form, usually her sanctuary and source of strength, now served only to mock what she was forbidden to have. Kale's wolf, magnificent and commanding, should have been her destined partner. He had chosen otherwise. Back within the pack's embrace, Kale struggled to project normalcy. Training sessions were grueling, the younger wolves driven to prove their worth. But a discordant note resonated beneath the surface. During a spar with Liam, his second, Kale faltered, his reflexes dulled. Liam, ordinarily easily bested, seized the opportunity and landed a blow, throwing Kale off kilter. "You all right, Alpha?" Liam asked, worry creasing his brow. Kale masked his lapse with a forced smile. "Fine. Just a momentary distraction. Push harder, Liam. Don't hold back." But the disorientation lingered, a subtle unsteadiness threatening to engulf him. He brushed it off as mere fatigue, driving himself even harder to compensate. Weakness was a luxury he could not afford, not now, not ever. Later, at the evening meal, the scent of roasted deer, typically irresistible, ignited a wave of nausea. He toyed with his portion, forcing himself to swallow. The pack sounds, the cheerful banter. The easy camaraderie grated on his frayed nerves. He felt detached, a solitary figure adrift amidst a sea of unfamiliar faces. Lysander caught his gaze, her possessive, knowing smile sending a shiver down his spine. He managed to return it, but the unease persisted. He felt manipulated, a marionette dancing to the tune of unseen puppeteers. Elder Rowan, observing from the head of the table, fixed Kale with a sharp, unwavering gaze. He had registered the subtle alterations in the alphas bearing the fleeting moments of confusion, the stilted smiles, the lack of appetite. He had also detected the unsettling shift in the pack's atmosphere, the underlying current of disquiet that had taken root since Kale's declaration. After the meal, Rowan approached Kale. "A word, Alpha?" Kale stiffened. He had been deliberately avoiding the elder, knowing Rowan possessed the wisdom to see through his charade. "Of course, Elder." They walked in silence to Rowan's dwelling, a modest cabin nestled deep within the oldest part of the forest. The air hung heavy with the aroma of dried herbs and ancient lore. Rowan gestured for Kale to be seated. "You seem burdened, Kale," Rowan began, his tone gentle yet unwavering. "Is there something you wish to confide?" Kale hesitated, torn between the desire to unburden himself and the fear of exposing his perceived weakness. "I am well, Elder. Only the weight of leadership bears down heavily." Rowan studied him, his gaze penetrating. "Leadership carries its burdens, yes, yet it should not leach away your very essence. I sense a deeper disquiet, Kale. Something unnatural." Kale shifted uncomfortably. "I assure you, Elder, everything is as it should be." Rowan sighed. "Arrogance is a treacherous trait, Kale. It can blind you to the truth, steering you down a perilous path. Remember, a leader's true strength resides not only in power, but in honesty and a willingness to seek counsel." He paused, his eyes piercing. "Have you fully contemplated the repercussions of your actions, Kale? Not merely for yourself, but for the entire pack?" Kale's jaw tightened. "I have weighed every factor, Elder. I am acting in the pack's best interests." "Are you certain?" Rowan countered softly. "Or are you driven by fear?" Kale rose abruptly. "I must take my leave, Elder. I have obligations to fulfill." He turned sharply and exited the cabin, the elder's words echoing like a persistent drumbeat. "Fear. Repercussions. He shoved them aside, burying them deep within his subconscious. Doubt was a luxury he could not afford. He was Kael Ironwood, Alpha of the Ironwood Pack. Strength was his shield. Control, his weapon. But as he made his way back toward the pack house, a wave of vertigo crashed over him, so potent that he stumbled, barely catching himself by grabbing a nearby tree. His knuckles turned bone white as he clung to the rough bark. The forest seemed to recede, the vibrant colors fading to muted shades. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting back the rising tide of nausea. When he opened them again, the world seemed flatter, less real. A sliver of doubt, insidious and unwelcome, wormed its way into his consciousness. Had he erred? Was he genuinely protecting the pack, or was he leading them all toward ruin? And, above all, did he possess the strength to confront the ramifications of his choice? The elders warning the fire spat and hissed in the hearth, throwing erratic shadows that danced a macabre jig on the Alpha's den's roughly hewn walls. Back to the blaze stood Kale, its heat a feeble match for the deep-seated chill that gripped him. He gazed out at the inky abyss beyond the single window, its blackness a mirror to the storm raging within. An unnatural quiet had descended upon the pack. The silence itself felt accusatory. Elder Rowan's arrival, however, offered a sliver of solace, a balm to Kale's raw nerves. He carried the scent of aged wood and soothing herbs, a familiar and welcome aroma. With measured steps, he crossed the room. His ancient eyes, though lined with time, still held a piercing clarity. Settling into the worn armchair opposite Kale, the leather groaned a soft complaint beneath his weight. Kale. Rowan's voice, a deep resonance that permeated the room without overpowering it, initiated the conversation. I have come to discuss a recent matters with you. Kale pivoted, jaw clenched tight. There's nothing to discuss, Elder. I addressed the pack. The matter is settled. His tone remained even, carefully masking the anxiety that gnawed at his core. Rowan's gaze remained locked on him, unwavering in its intensity. Truly settled, Kale? Or have you merely swept the mess under the rug, hoping it will vanish? Kale's hackles rose. I resent your insinuations, Elder. I made a decision for the pack's benefit. And what of your own well-being, Kale? What toll will this power you so desperately clutch take on you? Rowan leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the fire's glow. I have witnessed many cycles, Kale. I have witnessed the bond's threads weave themselves between souls, beheld its strength, its delicacy. I have also witnessed the devastation wrought when it is rejected, perverted, broken. Kale's fists tightened. There's no bond to speak of. Elara is mistaken. Perhaps she allowed emotion to overwhelm reason. It happens. He forced a chuckle, but its hollowness echoed starkly in the room. Disappointment weighed heavy in Rowan's sigh. Do you truly believe me blind, Kale? Or deaf? The pack sensed it. I sensed it. The raw, primal energy of a connection igniting then. The sickening crack as it was severed. Such an event leaves scars, Kale, on both parties. She's weak, Kale spat, venom coating the word. She is unworthy of Luna status, a mere distraction. Rowan's eyes narrowed to slits. Weakness is not always a detriment, Kale. Sometimes it's strength in disguise, and power devoid of compassion is simply brutality. He paused, allowing his words to settle. The bond is sacred, Kale. It is not to be treated lightly. To deny it is to reject a part of yourself, to deny the very essence of being a werewolf. The repercussions, they can be ruinous. They repercussions? Kale scoffed. What repercussions? I am Alpha. I am strong. I can endure anything. Pride is a treacherous weapon, Kale, Rowan cautioned, his voice dropping to a somber register. It clouds judgment, rendering you deaf to warnings. The Bonda, it's not so simple. It's a conduit, a fount of power, a source of equilibrium. Sever it, and you disrupt the flow. You weaken yourself, whether you were the... Acknowledge it or not, Kale recoiled, a flicker of doubt betraying his carefully constructed facade. He hastily masked it with renewed defiance. You're mistaken, Elder. I feel no different. I am as strong as ever. Are you truly? Ah, are you truly? Rowan challenged, his gaze unwavering. Or are you merely attempting to convince yourself? Have you registered the tremors, Kale? The fleeting weaknesses? The loss of control when near her? Kale's breath snagged in his throat. He had noticed those signs. Of course. The fleeting vertigo, the tremor in his hands, the irresistible pull he felt towards Elara, even after his rejection. But he had dismissed them, attributing them to strain, to exhaustion. He refused to confront the truth, the frightening possibility that Rowan was right. Those are temporary setbacks, he stammered, his voice losing its former conviction. Nothing I can't surmount. Rowan shook his head, sorrow etched deep in his features. You are a fool, Kale. An arrogant, obstinate fool. You imagine you can command everything, that you are immune to the forces that bind us all. But you are wrong. The bond will not be denied. It will fester, it will corrupt, and eventually it will devour you unless you find a way to mend it. Mend it? Mend it? Kale repeated, disbelief lacing his tone. How? I have already decided. There's no turning back. Perhaps not, Rowan conceded. But there are always paths available, bridges to be built. But you must be willing to see them, to humble yourself, to acknowledge your error. He rose, his movements deliberate yet steady. Contemplate my words, Kale. The pack's fate, and perhaps your very survival, may rest on it. Rowan turned and headed for the doorway, his shadow elongated and distorted by the dancing firelight. He paused at the threshold, glancing back at Kale with a mixture of compassion and concern. Never underestimate the power of the bond, Kale. And never underestimate the strength of the woman you rejected. She may be the only one who can save you now. With that, he departed, leaving Kale alone in the wavering firelight, the weight of Rowan's words like a leaden cloak. He stared out the window once more, the darkness now teeming with 1,000 unseen specters. The wind keened outside, a mournful lament that mirrored the torment in his heart. He was Alpha. He possessed strength. He was in control. Yet, as he stood there, isolated in the darkness, the gnawing sensation that he was losing everything intensified. And the most terrifying realization was, he had no idea how to arrest the slide. Growing stronger alone, the forest floor became a blur of emerald and umber beneath Elara's racing paws. It wasn't simply a run, it was a detonation. Unharnessed energy surged through her, propelling her with unprecedented force. Shifting hadn't been the goal. She'd been immersed in a novel meditation, striving for respite from the dull ache of Kale's dismissal, when the power simply ignited. At first, she was scarcely aware of her movement, the world unfolding around her in silent panorama. The wind shrieked past her ears, carrying pungent scents, damp soil and pine, amplified exponentially. She distinguished the musk of a rabbit trembling under a bramble, the coppery tang of a distant wounded deer, the lingering sharp essence of Kale's ire clinging to the trees marking the pack's boundary. The woods seemed to contract, details snapping into stark relief. The mosaic on a butterfly's wing, the furrowed texture of ancient bark, the delicate geometry of a spider's web, jeweled with dew, all seized her attention. Then, the unexpected. A fallen tree trunk, normally an insignificant obstacle, appeared in her path. Instead of clearing it with a leap, a jolt of pure, unadulterated instinct coursed through her, and she exerted her will. Not with muscle, but with an inner force. The log exploded, a shower of shattered wood. Elara stumbled, the sudden release of energy unbalancing her. She crashed to the ground, the impact stealing her breath. Panic seized her. What had she unleashed? It was impossible. Wolves didn't shatter obstacles with their minds. This defied nature. This was her. She reverted, her human form trembling uncontrollably. The air around her shimmered, a residue of power raising goose flesh on her arms. Hugging herself, she shivered, despite the heat emanating from her skin. This potency both exhilarating and terrifying. Elara knew silence was vital. Not yet. Kale would perceive it as a threat, augmenting his reasons to ostracize her. And the others, they wouldn't grasp it. They'd be consumed by fear. And so, she commenced secret practice. Far from the pack's territory, nestled deep within the woods, she discovered a secluded glade, where ancient trees formed a sylvan cathedral. Here, under the moon's vigilant glow, she sought mastery over the surge. Initially, it was ungainly, perilous. Trees were inadvertently uprooted, birds took flight in frantic swarms. Even the earth bore scorch marks from errant energy bursts. Gradually, meticulously, she gained command. She learned to harness the power, to focus, to direct it. She discovered the ability to heighten her senses at will, extending her vision, amplifying her hearing, discerning the faintest olfactory whispers carried on the breeze. She could mend minor injuries with a touch, hasten plant growth, even influence the very air around her. One twilight, after hours of training, she slumped, spent, beneath a massive oak. Moonlight bathed the clearing in silver, casting elongated, dancing shadows. Closing her eyes, she centered on the energy within, feeling its resonance, a vital pulse. Then, Kale's words echoed in her mind, his dismissive tone, the contemptuous glint in his eyes. "You're weak, Elara. You'll never possess sufficient strength." A wave of anger surged through her, scalding and intense. Yet, beneath the fury, she recognized a different emotion. Not pain, not sorrow, but an unusual clarity. It dawned on her then. Her hurt, his rejection, hadn't broken her. It had unleashed something dormant, a latent potential. Kale's cruelty had served as the catalyst, the spark igniting the inner flame. Her eyes opened, her gaze unwavering. No longer the timid, hesitant girl reliant on Kale's presence. She had become something greater, stronger. She was Elara Meadowlight, finally unearthing her own strength, her own purpose. Elder Rowan's prophecy, his warning to Kale about his diminishing power, flickered in her thoughts. A subtle, almost wicked notion blossomed. He had disowned her, dismissed their bond, cast her aside as insignificant. Let him bear the consequences. Let him witness what he had forfeited. Let him observe her ascendance. Elara rose, moonlight illuminating her features, her eyes blazing with newfound resolve. She had a considerable journey ahead, much to assimilate. Fear had vanished. Alone, she would become stronger. She would be prepared for whatever awaited. The Alpha's descent, the unease began as a subtle tremor, a phantom vibration beneath Kale's skin, easily shrugged off as mere fatigue. His days were a relentless tide of pack leadership, settling territorial disputes, overseeing rigorous training regimens, a constant projection of iron will. But the tremors intensified, morphing into savage shudders that convulsed him, stealing his breath and forcing him to grasp for purchase. One instant he was addressing his warriors, laying out novel battle strategies, his voice resonant with command. The next, a sickening lurch sent the world reeling. He faltered, the meticulously crafted mask of dominance fracturing as he gripped the table's edge. Articulated pronouncements devolved into a feral snarl, undeniably lupine even in human guise. A flicker of fear sparked in his warrior's eyes, a reaction he despised more than any physical torment. He dismissed them curtly, barking an order to resume drills, his tone ragged. He sought refuge in his chambers, the cavernous space now feeling like a gilded cage. These episodes were escalating in both frequency and intensity. He could feel the wolf spirit gnawing at the edges of his control, a wild thing straining to break free. This wasn't the disciplined, potent transformation he knew, but something else. Primeval, untamed, and dangerously close to overwhelming him. The pack healers arrived, concern etched on their faces. The most skilled in the territory, versed in occult practices and herbal remedies, they nonetheless appeared perplexed by his affliction. They examined him with practiced scrutiny, their expressions darkening. Elder Mara, her eyes clouded with worry, spoke first, her voice a soft lament. "Alpha, your essence is fragmented. The wolf is battling against you, not with you." An involuntary growl tore from Kale's throat, the beast's influence bleeding through. Absurd. I am sovereign. He attempted to project authority, but his voice betrayed his inner struggle. Liam, a younger healer, more grounded in his approach, interjected. "The bondet's a lifeline, Alpha. It moors the wolf to your human self. Sever that lifeline and the wolf is adrift, a tempest unleashed within." Kale's jaw clenched. The bond. Elara. He banished the thought, the sting of her rejection a persistent ache. The bond is inconsequential. There was no bond. He repeated the fabrication he'd spun for the pack, the falsehood that now threatened to devour him from the inside. Mara exchanged a loaded glance with Liam. They didn't challenge him directly, but their silence spoke volumes. They offered a bitter infusion of herbs and roots, a brew that did little to pacify the storm within. As they departed, Mara paused, her gaze penetrating. "Alpha, pride is a venomous draught. Heed the warnings before it consumes you entirely." Alone again, Kale yielded to the inevitable. The transformation ripped through him, tearing at muscle and sinew, contorting bone. A primal roar of agony erupted as his human form surrendered to the wolf. But this was no noble shift. His fur was coarse and unkempt, his eyes dilated and unfocused. He lunged against the reinforced door, splintering the oak with frantic claws. He was imprisoned, not just in his wolf shape, but in the self-made confines of his denial. He remained trapped in his wolf state for untold hours, a raging creature confined to his private quarters. When he eventually wrestled back control, reassuming his human form, he was drained, disoriented, and gripped by an unfamiliar terror. Fear, a sensation he had always equated with weakness, had become a constant companion. From the shadows, Brennan Darkwood observed, ambition blazing in his eyes. He had perceived the change in Kale, the subtle fissures in his composure. He had overheard the rumors, the hushed accounts of the Alpha's failing state. He had witnessed the healer's anxious expressions, the trepidation reflected in the warriors' faces. He approached Kale's chambers with deliberate stealth. He discovered Kale slumped against the wall, his complexion ashen. "Kale," he murmured, feigning concern. "Are you well?" Suspicion flared in Kale's gaze. He knew Brennan's long-held ambition, his ravenous hunger for power. "What is it you want, Brennan?" Brennan knelt, extending a hand in apparent support. "Only to be of assistance, Alpha. You are not yourself. The pack is worried." Kale scoffed, batting Brennan's hand away. "I require no assistance." A subtle smile played on Brennan's lips. "Perhaps not. Yet even the mightiest wolf needs an ally. And I have been a loyal ally, Kale, unfailingly so." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "However, loyalty must be earned, and strength must be maintained. Or else..." He left the sentence incomplete, but the meaning was unequivocal. The Alpha's position was vulnerable. Anger surged through Kale, quickly followed by a debilitating wave of weakness. He knew Brennan spoke the truth. He was losing his grip, and his pack was beginning to take notice. He needed to reclaim his power, to suppress the murmurs of doubt, to reaffirm his authority as Alpha. But how? The answer, he knew, lay in the truth he stubbornly refused to acknowledge. The bond. "Elara." He fixed Brennan with a hard stare. "Leave me." Brennan inclined his head, his smile broadening almost imperceptibly. "As you command, Alpha. But remember, I am always available should you require my aid." He turned and departed, leaving Kale alone in his crumbling dominion, the weight of his own hubris crushing him like a suffocating cloak. The Alpha's decline had begun, and Brennan Darkwood was patiently awaiting the inevitable fall. Truth revealed the cloying tang of blood mingled with the sharp bite of ozone, an olfactory record of Kale's latest agonizing shift. He wheezed on the flagstones of the pack hall, his inner wolf barely leashed, residual energy shimmering in visible waves around him. A paralysis of dread gripped the gathered wolves, who clung to the perimeter like shipwreck survivors to debris. Only Brennan Darkwood held himself with unnerving calm, his gaze a hard, glittering appraisal of the Alpha's suffering. Then, silence descended like a shroud. Rowan, ancient lines of concern mapping his face, entered with measured steps. He carried the burden of ages in his posture, his wise eyes taking in the grim tableau with sorrowful recognition. He raised a weathered hand, quelling the rising tide of worried mutters. "Enough," he declared, his voice surprisingly resonant given his years. This travesty ends now." He knelt beside Kale, his touch unexpectedly tender, as he examined the Alpha's ravaged features. The prophecy, it foretold a time when the Alpha's strength would wane, his connection to the land, to his very essence, would unravel. It forewarned of encroaching darkness should he deviate from the appointed path. Rowan lifted his head, his gaze encompassing the assembled pack. Kale has veered astray. He has violated a sacred trust, a covenant that should have bolstered him, grounded him. And in so doing, he has jeopardized us all. Gareth Stoneclaw pushed forward, his brow creased with worry. "Elder Rowan, with all due respect, what are you implying?" "Kale is our Alpha. He would never intentionally bring harm to the pack." Rowan's sigh was the dry whisper of autumn leaves skittering across stone. Perhaps malice wasn't his intent. but pride, festering fear they have obscured his vision. Kael Ironwood spurned his soulmate. A unified gasp shuddered through the room. Disbelief wrestled with nascent horror on every face. Lysandra Blackwood, who had been hovering near Brennan, seemed petrified, her flawless features fractured by the unexpected revelation. "A soulmate?" Gareth echoed, his voice thick with confusion. "But to whom?" Rowan's gaze settled on Kale, his expression laced with pity. "To Elara." The ensuing quiet was a tangible thing, pressing down on them all. Every eye in the hall swiveled toward Kale, who remained motionless, his breathing shallow and ragged. He offered no denial. He couldn't. The truth hung between them, a palpable weight. Lysandra staggered forward, her voice a mere breath. "No. That's impossible. Kale would never—" "He did," Rowan affirmed, his voice heavy with regret. "He denied the bond. He publicly shamed her. He declared her weak, unworthy. He deceived you all." The room exploded. Accusations flew like poisoned darts, urgent inquiries clamoring for release. Gareth, his face flushed crimson, shouldered his way through the throng. "Kale, is this true? Did you reject your bond with Elara?" Kale finally roused, his eyes fluttering open. He met Gareth's gaze, the accusing stares of his pack, and a momentary flash of shame flickered across his face. He tried to speak, but only a strangled sound emerged from his throat. The effort seemed to further deplete him, and he slumped back against the cold stone, his body racked with tremors. "He cannot refute it," Rowan declared, his voice slicing through the tumult. "The truth is branded onto his very essence. The rejected bond now gnaws at him, weakening him from within. He is reaping the bitter harvest of his arrogance." Lysandra, her face a rigid mask of fury and betrayal, finally found her voice. You chose her over me? After everything I've sacrificed for you, for the pack?" Kale looked at her, a flicker of what might have been remorse in his eyes, but he remained mute, incapable of offering explanations, justifications, or comfort. Gareth pivoted back to Rowan, his tone imploring. "Is there anything we can do? Can the bond be salvaged?" Rowan shook his head, sorrow etched deep in his face. "The initial rejection has inflicted irreparable wounds. The balance has been shattered. Kale's only salvation now rests with Elara. Only she possesses the capacity to mend the fractured bond, to provide the strength he so desperately needs to survive. But after the profound injury he has inflicted, will she?" The question echoed in the tense atmosphere, unanswered, a daunting prospect. The pack traded glances, their faces shadowed by uncertainty and fear. Their alpha, their leader, the one they had entrusted their lives to, had betrayed their faith. And now their destiny, their very survival, depended on the will of the woman he had so carelessly discarded. Brennan Darkwood, who had maintained a disconcerting silence throughout the entire ordeal, finally spoke. His voice, like polished obsidian, cut through the charged atmosphere. A most intriguing development. "It appears our Alpha's judgment was compromised. Perhaps it is time to reassess his fitness to lead." He paused, his gaze lingering on Kale's caber. "Prostrate form. After all, a weakened Alpha poses a danger to the entire pack." His words hung ominously in the air, a stark harbinger of the ensuing power struggle. The pack, already reeling from the revelation of Kale's perfidy, now faced a pert, terrifying new reality. Their leader was failing, and a rival for dominance waited in the shadows. Lysandra, still undone by the exposé, approached Kale and knelt at his side. Her hand trembled above his face, but she refrained from touching him. You deceived me," she breathed, her voice a volatile mix of fury and anguish. "You used me." Kale's eyes flickered open again, his gaze locking onto hers, his expression a tableau of suffering. He attempted to reach for her, but his arm fell back uselessly to his side. He was too depleted, too broken to offer solace or explanation. Rowan observed them, his face etched with profound sadness. "The wages of hubris," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "They invariably exceed our wildest imaginings." The pack remained transfixed, the weight of Kale's deception bearing down on them. They had been betrayed, not by a foe from beyond their borders, but by their own Alpha, their chosen leader. And now they stood at a precipice, their fate hanging by a thread, contingent on the choices of a woman they had all underestimated. Accusations and division. The air in the clearing crackled with animosity, thick and suffocating. The scent of pine and damp earth was overpowered by the metallic tang of fear and anger. Gareth Stoneclaw, a towering figure with eyes like flint, stepped forward, his voice a low growl that resonated through the tense crowd. "She did this." Elara cursed him, weakened our Alpha. "She is a witch, a blight upon this pack." His accusation landed like a physical blow. Elara recoiled, her breath catching in her throat. She stood small amidst the sea of accusing faces, the firelight painting her skin in flickering shadows that made her appear even more vulnerable. "That's not true," she cried out, her voice barely audible above the murmuring dissent. "I would never." "Liar!" someone shouted from the back, the word laced with venom. Others echoed the sentiment, their faces contorted with rage and suspicion. The pack's fear, already raw from Elder Rowan's revelation, now had a target, a scapegoat. They needed someone to blame for Kale's failing strength, for the encroaching darkness that threatened their way of life. And Elara, with her quiet nature and her undeniable connection to the Alpha, was the perfect candidate. Gareth advanced, his shadow looming over her. "Kale was strong before you came, unbreakable. Now he can barely hold his wolf form. It's your fault. You have poisoned him with your weakness, your unnatural bond." Elara's eyes flashed with defiance, a spark igniting in the face of such blatant injustice. "The bond is not a curse, Gareth. It's a sacred thing. Kale rejected it, not me." "Rejected? He saw you for what you are, nothing. A fragile human, unworthy of an Alpha. He did what was necessary for the good of the pack." Gareth spat, his words like shards of ice. "But your spite wouldn't allow it, would it? You had to punish him, to bring him low." She shook her head vehemently, tears welling in her eyes. "I swear, I haven't done anything to hurt him. I care about him, about this pack. I would never intentionally cause harm." A woman named Bronwyn, her face etched with worry lines, stepped forward from the crowd. "Elara has always been kind, helpful. I've never known her to be anything but gentle." "Gentle or cunning?" Gareth sneered. "Don't be fooled by her meek demeanor, Bronwyn. She hides her true nature well." He turned back to the crowd, his voice rising in a crescendo of accusation. "We cannot allow her to remain among us. She is a danger to Kale, to the pack. I say she must be banished, or perhaps a more permanent solution is required." A collective gasp rippled through the clearing. The word execution hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine, a primal fear gripping her heart. The pack was dividing, fracturing along lines of loyalty and fear. Some, like Bronwyn, stood staunchly by Elara, remembering her kindness and her unwavering dedication to the pack's well-being. Others, swayed by Gareth's impassioned words and fueled by their own anxieties, demanded retribution, a sacrifice to appease the unknown forces that were plaguing them. A young warrior, Liam, who had often sought Elara's counsel, stepped forward hesitantly. "Gareth, with all due respect, we can't just accuse her without proof. Elder Rowan said the bond is weakening Kale because he rejected it, not because Elara cursed him." "Proof?" Gareth roared, his face turning crimson. "Kale's failing health is proof enough. He was strong before her. Now look at him. He can barely stand." The argument raged back and forth, voices rising in anger and desperation. The clearing became a battleground of words, each accusation and defense further widening the chasm between them. Elara stood in the eye of the storm, feeling the weight of their fear and suspicion pressing down on her. She knew that her life, her very existence within the pack, hung precariously in the balance. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the din, sharp and commanding. "Enough!" All eyes turned towards the edge of the clearing, where Anya, a seasoned warrior known for her level-headedness and unwavering loyalty to the pack, stood tall and resolute. "This infighting is tearing us apart," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "We need to focus on finding a solution, not on blaming each other. Accusations without evidence are just fueling the fire." Anya walked towards Elara, her gaze unwavering. "Elara, I don't know if you're responsible for what's happening to Kale, but I do know that you've always been a valuable member of this pack. I'm willing to hear you out." Elara met Anya's gaze, a glimmer of hope flickering within her. "Thank you, Anya," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just want to help. I want to save Kale, to save us all." Anya nodded, then turned back to the crowd. "We will hold a council. We will listen to all sides, and we will make a decision based on reason and evidence, not on fear and suspicion. Until then, I forbid any further accusations or threats against Elara." Her words carried weight, silencing the angry mob, at least for the moment. But Elara knew that this was only a temporary reprieve. The pack was deeply divided, and a council would be a battleground of its own. She would have to fight for her life, for her place within the pack, and she would have to find a way to prove her innocence, to show them that she was not the enemy, but their only hope. But how could she prove a negative? And how could she save Kale from a fate he seemed determined to embrace? As the crowd slowly dispersed, their faces still etched with doubt and suspicion, Elara felt a profound sense of loneliness. She was an outsider, caught in a web of ancient traditions and unspoken fears. And she knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, with betrayal, and with the agonizing possibility that she might not be able to save the man she loved, or the pack she had come to call home. The only hope the air in Kale's chambers reeked of illness, a far cry from his signature blend of pine and leather. Elara paused at the entrance. The guards, once paragons of stoicism, now appeared haggard and apprehensive. Anya had all but propelled her forward, her frantic whispers detailing Kale's precipitous decline following the council meeting. They hadn't fully embraced her accusations of a curse, but Gareth's insidious doubt had taken root, poisoning their faith in her. Now, desperation reigned, and Anya, bless her insightful heart, had recognized the truth Elara had struggled to accept. Kale was fading. Gathering her resolve, Elara entered. Dim light filtered through drawn curtains shrouding the room. Kale was prone in bed, his once vibrant features now wan and hollow. He was gaunt, his powerful physique diminished. An unsettling energy crackled in the air, a palpable echo of their shattered bond. It felt like a flayed nerve, each pulse radiating agony through her. "Elara?" His voice, a mere rasp, was scarcely audible. He weakly turned his head, his eyes, usually blazing with command, glazed with suffering. An unseen force drew her closer, her heart aching at his condition. "Kale," she responded softly. "Leave us," he croaked to the sentries outside. A moment of hesitation followed, then the sound of receding footsteps echoed down the corridor. His gaze, searching, swept over her face. They think you cursed me." "I'm aware," she said, her tone measured. Resentment simmered, a potent cocktail of betrayal and hurt. Yet seeing him like this, it eclipsed everything else, at least for the moment. I didn't believe it," he breathed, wincing with the effort. "Not entirely." A humorless sound, a scoff, escaped Elara. "Didn't you? Your words at the council suggested otherwise." He briefly closed his eyes, a shadow of shame gracing his face. "I had to protect the pack," Gareth had. His voice trailed off, claimed by exhaustion. "Protect them from what, Kale? The truth? That they're Alpha Erd?" Her voice gained volume, the carefully erected barrier threatening to crumble. He reopened his eyes, pleading evident in their depths. "Elara, please, I'm not well." She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to center. The absence of their bond felt like a chasm in her soul. It was tearing at him, sapping his strength with each passing moment. And with a chilling clarity, she understood that her abilities amplified after their rejection offered the only chance for his survival. Anya mentioned. He coughed, a ragged, rattling sound that chilled her to the bone. "She said you might be able to help." Elara stared at her hands, clenching them. Aid him? After all he'd done. The notion bordered on unbearable. He had publicly humiliated her, rejected their bond, condemned her to exile, or worse. He had chosen authority and politics over her, over them. "Why should I, Kale?" The question, barely a whisper, dripped with years of stifled emotion. "Why should I lift a finger to save you, given your actions?" His gaze met hers, steady despite his frailty. "Because you're the only one who can." He paused, struggling to draw breath. And because I was wrong." The admission, so understated, so tardy, hung heavy in the air. It was inadequate, far from sufficient, yet it served as a beginning. Elara moved to the window, drawing back the heavy drapes, allowing the afternoon sun to flood the chamber. It illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, and the lines of anguish etched on Kale's face. She felt his life force draining, the fractured bond a constant, agonizing leech. "Tell me," she instructed, turning back to him, her voice firm despite her inner conflict. "Tell me the truth, Kale. Why did you lie?" He hesitated, pain flitting across his features. I was afraid," he confessed, his voice barely there. "Afraid of the bond, of its influence. Afraid of being vulnerable. Gareth, he convinced me it was a weakness, a burden, that you were a liability." "And you embraced his words?" Her voice tightened. "I desired to," he admitted. "I wanted to think I possessed complete control, that I needed no one. But I erred, Elara. Profoundly so." She observed him, truly observed him, seeing beyond the Alpha, the commander, the invulnerable facade. She discerned the trepidation, the remorse, the desperate hope clinging to his gaze. And beneath it all, she saw the ember of the man she had loved, the man who had seen her, genuinely seen her, before apprehension and ambition had clouded his judgment. "The pack requires you, Kale," she spoke softly, "whether they realize it or not. And I cannot stand by and watch you succumb." He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers grazing hers. Elara. She did not recoil. Instead, she clasped his hand in hers, feeling the faint pulse of his remaining vitality. It was feeble, rapidly fading. "It will be agonizing," she cautioned, her voice a mere breath. "I cannot predict the outcome. My abilities, they have grown stronger, augmented by the broken bond. I possess only a partial grasp of them." "I trust you," he said, his gaze locked on hers. "More than anyone." Elara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She felt the anger, the pain, the betrayal, all swirling within her, threatening to overwhelm her. But beneath it all, she registered the love, the connection, the fragments of the bond that persisted. Opening her eyes, her gaze resolute, she said, her tone imbued with newfound determination, "Then hold on, Kale, because this will be excruciating." She focused her energy, tapping into the torrent within. It felt like a tempest, a untamed, raging power. Cautiously, slowly, she began to channel it towards Kale, towards the fractured bond that was consuming him. A faint, shimmering light suffused the room, and Elara braced herself for the inevitable agony. She represented his last hope, and she refused to fail him or the pack. Confrontation. The air in Kale's chambers was a suffocating blend of medicinal herbs, a futile attempt to conceal the bitter, metallic odor of his illness. Elara's nostrils flared as she ventured deeper. The once grand room felt cramped, dwarfed by the sight of him sprawled on the vast bed. He resembled a casualty of war, his features sharpened, his skin gleaming with fever, the vibrant jade of his eyes reduced to muddy pools. Trapped within heavy furs, he tossed and turned, murmuring nonsense. She approached with trepidation, her pulse a frantic tattoo. He was lost in the haze of his failing mind, unaware of her presence. This was the Alpha who had scorned her, negated their bond, and chosen dominion over authenticity. Now, he was a shattered effigy of the man she'd been naive enough to adore. "Kale," she breathed, her voice a mere puff of air. His head jerked up, his gaze struggling to focus. For a split second, recognition sparked in his eyes, followed by bewilderment and torment. "Elara?" he croaked, his voice ragged. "What are you doing here?" The question, weak as it was, fanned the embers of her long-suppressed anger. She advanced, her shadow enveloping his face. "I'm here because you're dying, Kale, and against all reason. I appear to be your only hope." His brow knitted in a useless attempt at composure. "Hope? I need no hope from you." The words were slurred, his defiance a hollow echo. Elara's tone hardened. "Spare me the charade, Kale. Not any more. You need me, and you know it. You've always known. That's the source of your surprise. Fear gnaws at you, consuming you from the inside." He tried to rise, but a violent tremor seized him, forcing him back against the pillows. "Live," he rasped, the exertion draining him. "I don't want you here." "Oh, I believe you do," Elara countered, her voice a silken threat. She reached out, her fingertips ghosting across his scorching brow. He recoiled from her touch, yet didn't push her away. "Tell me, Kale. Explain your lies, your denial of the bond, Your preference for Gareth's venomous lies over the evident truth. His breathing turned shallow, his chest rising and falling erratically. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if to shut out her words, her form, the stark reality of his demise. "Don't," he groaned. "Please just leave." Elara remained steadfast. This transcended his personal plight. It concerned the welfare of the pack, the balance of power, the truth buried beneath layers of deceit and ambition. "Tell me, Kale," she pressed, her voice unwavering. "Look me in the eye and tell me you felt nothing. No pull, no connection, no undeniable confirmation of our bond. Tell me you didn't realize what you were sacrificing." He opened his eyes, and briefly, Elara caught a glimpse of the man she once knew, the leader she had placed her faith in. But it was quickly eclipsed by a wave of agony, both physical and emotional. I was afraid," he whispered, barely audible. "Afraid?" Elara scoffed. "Afraid of what, Kale? Vulnerability? Admitting your need for companionship? Sharing your authority?" He shook his head feebly. "Gareth, he said it would diminish me, that a bond with you would render me a weaker alpha. And you swallowed that lie?" Elara's voice was laced with incredulity. "You trusted a viper like Gareth over the truth etched in your very soul, over the ancient edicts that govern us." Kale coughed, a ragged guttural sound that convulsed his frame. A crimson stain bloomed on his lips. I erred," he gasped. "Terribly." Elara felt a flicker of something akin to pity, swiftly suppressed. He had charted his course, and now faced its inevitable conclusion. "You did more than err, Kale. You were cruel. You humiliated me. You exiled me from your existence as though I were a blemish on your reputation." He reached out, his hand trembling violently, and clutched at her wrist. "I understand," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "I am aware of my actions. Please, Elara, forgive me." "Forgiveness is earned, Kale," Elara stated, her voice devoid of warmth. "And at this moment, you have earned nothing. You defamed me. You deceived the pack. You shattered the bond intended to safeguard us all. And to what end? For power? For the approval of a man who would cheerfully watch us all burn?" His grip tightened slightly, a desperate attempt to cling to her, to cling to life itself. "Save me," he begged, his voice cracking. "Please, save me." Elara gazed down at him, her heart a maelstrom of warring emotions. Fury, resentment, lingering affection, and a profound sense of duty clashed within her. She knew that healing him would be a torturous ordeal, both for him and for herself. It would entail reopening the wound he had inflicted with such disregard, forcing them both to relive the anguish of their severed bond. And there was no assurance of success. His rejection had been so absolute, so final, that the damage might be beyond repair, but the alternative was unbearable. Should Kale succumb, the pack would plunge into pandemonium. Gareth would usurp control, with cataclysmic consequences. Elara could not allow that to transpire. Even at the cost of her own well-being, even if it meant confronting the man who had shattered her spirit, she had to attempt it. "Speak the truth, Kale," she demanded, her voice low and intense. "Tell me everything. Reveal Gareth's schemes, the Council's machinations, every secret you've concealed. Speak the truth, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'll contemplate saving you." He shut his eyes once more, his face twisted in torment. I cannot," he whimpered. "He will kill me." "He's already killing you, Kale," Elara retorted, her voice sharp. Choose me or him. Life or death, the truth or the web of lies that has brought you to this sorry state. Silence descended, broken only by Kale's labored breathing. Elara waited, her gaze unwavering, her heart hammering in her chest. The fate of the pack, and potentially her own, hung precariously in the balance. The air thrummed with unspoken tension, the residual energy of their broken bond, a silent testament to the connection that still bound them. His wolf shifted restlessly within, barely contained by his failing physical form, a primal urge yearning for the mate he had senselessly rejected. Finally, Kale's eyes flickered open, meeting hers. This time, there was no confusion, no pain, only raw supplication. "Help me," he whispered, barely audible. "Please help me." The words were devoid of pride and arrogance, a stark plea from the depths of his tormented soul. Elara knew her course. The confession, a cloying stillness, filled Kale's chamber, thick with the cloying odor of illness and remorse. Elara, an obsidian sculpture etched with moonlight, stood sentinel at his bedside, arms folded. Each rasping breath cost him dearly, a labored symphony of decay. The vibrant eyes she'd once known were now dull pools reflecting a creeping abyss threatening to swallow him whole. He resembled a deposed monarch, bereft of dominion and dignity. "Gareth," she prompted, her voice a low, unwavering current that cleaved the heavy silence. "Tell me everything." Kale winced, a convulsive shiver racking his wasted frame. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if to physically bar the memory from entering. He orchestrated it all, from the very beginning. Orchestrated how? Elara persisted, allowing him no quarter. The anguish twisting his features offered a meager, bitter satisfaction, but she demanded more. She needed the truth, stripped bare. He coughed, a phlegmy, agonizing sound that reverberated in the stifling air. He seeded doubts within me, whispered poison regarding your inexperience, your inherent kindness. The last word escaped him like venom. He insisted the pack required unwavering strength, leadership unburdened by sentiment, that a bond, such a profound connection, would cripple me. Elara's expression remained impassive, yet a shadow, perhaps hurt, perhaps merely weary resignation, flickered across her face. "Cripple you?" she echoed, disbelief coloring the word. "He believed our bond would weaken you?" "He argued it would skew my judgment," Kale croaked, his voice almost lost. "That I'd prioritize you above the needs of the pack. That I'd become incapable of making the necessary, brutal decisions." He opened his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, Elara glimpsed the Alpha he once embodied, the one she'd esteemed, even cherished. He conjured an image of a leader swayed by emotion, a mere puppet dancing to your tune. "And you succumbed to his lies?" The question, though softly spoken, held the sting of accusation. Kale swallowed hard, his throat working. I desperately wanted to believe him. Fear consumed me, Elara. Fear of the sheer force of the bond. Fear of relinquishing control. He closed his eyes again, a solitary tear escaping to carve a path down his weathered cheek. I had devoted my life to preparing for the mantle of Alpha. I wouldn't permit anything to jeopardize that destiny. "So you sacrificed me," Elara declared, her tone devoid of all affect. "You traded our future for your own ambition." He flinched anew, the reaction more violent this time. "It was never meant to unfold this way," he groaned. I deluded myself I believed I could compartmentalize, that I could sever the bond and still maintain my leadership. His breathing grew increasingly shallow, his chest rising and falling with torturous effort. I was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. And Gareth? Elara pressed, refusing to indulge his self-recrimination. What role did he play in this elaborate charade? Kale struggled for the strength to articulate the truth. He craved power. It has always been his driving force. He perceived the bond as a direct impediment to his aspirations. He understood that if I were intrinsically linked to you, I would prove resistant to his manipulations. So, he exploited my perceived vulnerabilities to control you, Elara concluded, her voice flat and hard. He preyed on your insecurities and anxieties, and you allowed it. Kale offered a feeble nod, unable nod, to meet her steady gaze. He planted seeds of doubt, suggesting you lacked the fortitude to be Luna, that you would crumble under the burden, the unrelenting pressures, that you would shatter beneath the weight of the pack's expectations. And you embraced that falsehood as well? Elara inquired, a sliver of anger finally lacing her tone. You genuinely considered me weak. No, Kale countered, his voice a desperate plea. Not weak, simply different. You possessed compassion, empathy, qualities I erroneously deemed liabilities in a leader. So, you prioritized a deceiver and a schemer, Elara spat, her voice heavy with scorn. Someone who would echo your desires, regardless of the cost to the pack. He coughed again, a wrenching spasm that left him struggling for air. I was blinded by arrogance, he confessed, his voice a mere thread. I arrogantly believed I possessed the requisite wisdom. I convinced myself I could master every situation. But I was wrong. Tragically, irrevocably wrong. Elara observed him, features an inscrutable mask. She registered the authentic contrition in his gaze, the torment consuming him from within. Yet she also acknowledged the years of self-importance and repudiation, the choices he had consciously made that had irrevocably altered both their destinies. Why reveal this to me now, Kale? She questioned, her voice gentle yet firm. Why this deathbed confession? A faint smile flickered across his lips, a fleeting echo of the magnetic alpha he once was. Because you deserve the unadulterated truth. And because I believe you remain the only one who can offer salvation. Elara's eyes narrowed perceptibly. And what compels you to believe I harbor any desire to save you? Because, he murmured, his voice fading to a whisper. Because I know you intimately, Elara. I know that despite the profound betrayal, a part of you still cares. And because the pack desperately needs you. They require you to embrace your role as Luna, as their guiding light. They need your strength, your empathy, everything I so foolishly rejected. He extended a trembling hand in her direction, his fingertips lightly brushing against her arm. Please, Elara, he pleaded, his voice barely audible. Assist me. Help us both. Elara stared down at him, her heart a tempest of conflicting emotions. Fury, resentment, and an enduring, steadfast love engaged in a fierce battle within her. She saw the broken man before her, a mere caricature of the formidable Alpha he once was, and she recognized the truth resonating within his words. He was terrified, exposed, and utterly reliant on her. But could she truly offer forgiveness? Could she transcend her own anguish and bitterness to rescue him? To rescue the pack teetering on the precipice of destruction? The answer, she knew, was far from simple. It demanded profound self-sacrifice, a leap of absolute faith, and a willingness to embrace the very connection he had so callously severed. The weight of the decision pressed upon her, a suffocating burden. The fate of the pack, and potentially her own future happiness, hung precariously in the balance. She met Kale's imploring eyes, and for the first time she saw not the arrogant alpha driven by ambition, but the frightened, vulnerable man hidden beneath the facade. And in that instant, a spark ignited within her soul, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps simply a flicker of nascent hope. The path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, fraught with hardship and anguish. But she knew, with a conviction that reverberated throughout her being, that she could not turn away. A condition of trust, the reek of spent life, decaying pine needles and iron-tinged blood saturated the Alpha's chamber. Kale, usually a titan of strength, was a study in stillness, his breath a shallow rasp. Elara watched over him, her face a shifting mosaic of fury, sorrow, and a hesitant ember of belief. "So, she began, her voice a low blade that sliced through the heavy air. "Gareth played you, convinced you I was a weakness." Kale's eyelids fluttered, a spark of his former self igniting, then fading. "He claimed the bond would cripple me, that you lacked the strength to lead as Luna." A mirthless laugh bubbled from Elara's throat. "And you swallowed that poison? You, who championed fortitude and fealty, succumbed to such transparent lies?" She raked a hand through her hair, a gesture belying the tempest within. "It appears vanity was your true undoing, Kale." A racking cough seized him, a brutal sound that shook his fragile frame. Eared profoundly. The words were gossamer threads, each a monumental effort. I grasped that now. Elara remained unmoved, arms folded tight. Of what use is that awareness now? You're fading, Kale. Your pack is fragmenting. Gareth circles like a predator, ready to pounce on the power you've ceded, all because you trusted a serpent over your destined mate. His eyes squeezed shut, a solitary tear carving a path through the hollow of his cheek. "Please, Elara, aid me. Aid us." She scrutinized him, her expression an impenetrable shield. The urge to turn her back, to let him drown in the consequences of his choices, warred with the primal instinct to safeguard, to mend, etched into her very core. The faint ghost of their bond lingered, a connection he'd callously severed, yet it still resonated within her. "Why should I?" she questioned, her tone a silken threat. "You spurned me, debased me. You publicly renounced our joining, branding me a fantasist, a weakling. Why should I expend an ounce of effort to rescue you, or your pack?" Kale strained to speak, his chest laboring. "Because you are superior to me, more resilient. You always have been." Elara's eyes narrowed to slits. "Empty words are worthless when you're staring into the abyss, Kale. They buy you nothing." A pause, then, "I will assist you." A fragile hope kindled in his gaze. "You will?" "But," she countered, raising a hand to quell his thanks, "it comes at a price." Kale's brow creased with suspicion. "A price?" "Indeed," Elara declared, her voice suddenly burnished with steel. "If I am to aid you, if I am to gamble everything to preserve your pack, you must acknowledge the truth openly." Confusion muddied his face. "What truth?" "The truth of the bond," she stated, her eyes locking onto his. "The truth of your rejection. The truth of Gareth's machinations." You must confess everything before the entire pack. Horror bloomed in Kale's eyes. The color fled his face, making him resemble a corpse. I cannot. Cannot? Elara challenged, arching a brow. Or will not? I admitting that it would shatter everything, he gasped. My authority, my standing the pack's confidence in me, your authority is already eroding, Elara pointed out, her tone biting. Your standing is in ruins. And your pack's confidence? It hangs by a thread, a consequence of your deceptions and your hubris. She closed the distance between them, her voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper. This is not about you, Kale. It's about them. It's about the pack you swore to defend. They deserve clarity, and a leader willing to embrace honesty, regardless of the difficulty. He squeezed his eyes shut, his face a canvas of torment. But Gareth, he'll exploit it. He'll seize the opening to usurp control. Let him, Elara replied, her voice unwavering. Let him reveal his true self. Let the pack decide their allegiance. A man who has lied and manipulated to cling to dominion, or a woman prepared to champion what is right, even if it defies everything you thought you knew. Silence descended, punctuated only by Kale's ragged inhales and exhales. He grappled with himself, the battle within him visible, the weight of his pride, his anxieties, his ambition, all fought against the urgent need to salvage himself and his pack. At last, he opened his eyes, his gaze meeting Elara's with Nasimpa. Humility. And if I comply, if I confess Allah, will you genuinely aid me? Elara nodded, her expression softening marginally. I will, but not for you, Kale. For the pack. For the bond that still smolders between us, however faintly. And, she tacked on, her voice regaining its hardness, because I refuse to let Gareth triumph. Kale swallowed hard, his Adam's apple jumping. Then I shall do it. He closed his eyes once more, preparing for the coming tempest. Instruct me in what I must say. Elara leaned closer, her voice a low, steady current. You will recount everything. You will speak of the bond, of your trepidation, of Gareth's fabrications. You will admit your error and offer your regret. And then, she paused, her eyes blazing with resolve. You will entrust me to mend what you have fractured. She straightened, her gaze encompassing his weakened form. But understand this, Kael Ironwood, she declared, her voice resonating with power. This is your final opportunity. Should you betray my confidence again, should you seek to manipulate me or the pack, I will depart, and there will be no return. Kale regarded her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of dread and anticipation. He knew Elara spoke the truth. This was his last resort, and he knew, deep in his heart, that she was his only salvation. I understand, he rasped, his voice barely a breath. I will do whatever is necessary. Public acknowledgement, a heavy quiet descended as Kale was guided to the heart of the gathering. His breaths came in shallow gasps, each one a painful effort. The Alpha, once a figure of commanding presence, now appeared diminished, flanked by two somber warriors. His gaze swept over his assembled pack. Their faces were a study in concern, bewilderment, and disbelief. Murmurs trickled through the ranks, receding only when he lifted a trembling hand. My pack, he croaked, his voice a raw whisper that barely reached past the frontmost wolves. I stand before you culpable. I have deceived you. He halted, struggling to regain composure, the effort causing him to visibly waver. From the fringe of the crowd, Elara watched, her expression inscrutable. She'd agreed to offer succor, but under conditions so restrictive they felt like a bitter draught. First, this public expiation. A ripple of unrest spread. Kael Ironwood, a deceiver? The idea seemed almost impossible. Gareth, positioned near the front, his countenance carefully composed, shifted his weight, a glint of something veiled within his eyes. Kale pressed on, a flicker of newfound strength bolstering his voice, born of sheer resolve. I denied a connection, a true, vital bond, essential to this pack's well-being. He coughed, a harsh, rattling sound that chilled those nearby. I proclaimed there was nothing between Elara Meadowlight and me, that she was imagining things, that she was frail. His gaze locked onto Elara, a raw, beseeching look in his eyes. I was mistaken, catastrophically, irrevocably so. A profound silence followed, punctuated only by the soughing wind through the trees and Kale's labored breathing. Elara remained still, arms crossed, her face an impassive canvas. She understood the gravity of his words, the price he was paying to speak them. His pride, the bedrock of his being, was crumbling. A young wolf, barely a fledgling, spoke, his voice laced with confusion. Alpha, what are you admitting to? A bond? With Elara? Kale gave a slow nod, each movement seemingly sapping what little strength he had left. A soul bond, of the truest kind. I felt it from our first encounter. That I succumbed to fear. Fear. Gareth's voice cut through the stillness, sharp with incredulity. Alpha, are you unwell? What dread could inspire you to reject such a connection? Kale ignored him, his attention riveted on Elara. I dreaded vulnerability. I dreaded she would weaken me. That love would undermine my strength, my dedication to the pack. His voice cracked, a guttural expression of agony. I was a fool, a craven fool. He closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself. When he opened them, they burned with a pain that seemed to permeate the clearing. Elara is my Luna, my destined mate, and I cast her aside. A collective gasp arose from the pack. Luna? Elara? The quiet, reserved woman who'd always remained aloof, who had suffered public scorn at their alpha's hand. The pieces began slotting into place, revealing a long-concealed truth. Kale continued, his voice now surprisingly resolute, as if the very act of confession was, for a fleeting moment, restorative. Gareth was aware of the bond. He fueled my denial. He framed it as a weakness, a liability. He manipulated me, preying on my fears, my ambition. His gaze swung towards Gareth, his eyes blazing with sudden, fierce indignation. He sought to exploit my folly, to usurp power for himself. Gareth's carefully maintained facade finally shattered. His face reddened, and his eyes darted nervously around the clearing, seeking support. But he discovered none. The pack was too stunned, too betrayed, to offer him comfort. This is utter madness, Gareth stammered, his voice escalating in pitch. He's raving. He doesn't comprehend what he's saying. But no one credited him. The truth hung palpable in the air, undeniable and damning. Kale's admission, though agonizing, resonated with a fundamental truth they all intuited. They had witnessed the way he regarded Elara, the barely suppressed yearning in his gaze. They had sensed the tension between them. the unacknowledged connection that even his rejection could not fully extinguish. Kale turned back to the pack, his voice faint but resolute. I have fractured the bond, and in doing so, I have enfeebled both myself and this pack. I implore Elara's absolution, and I ask that you place your faith in her. She alone can mend what I have broken. She is the true strength we possess. He looked at Elara once more, his eyes brimming with desperate hope. Elara, I beg you, aid us. The clearing was hushed, every gaze trained on Elara. She remained motionless, her expression still unreadable. The fate of the pack, the life of their alpha, teetered on the edge, dependent on her decision. The air thrummed with silent anticipation, the weight of expectation pressing down. She knew the stakes involved. She knew the anguish Kale had inflicted, the humiliation she had endured. But she also knew the pack, the wolves who had languished under Kale's flawed reign, the wolves who deserved a chance at a brighter future. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her arms. She took a step forward, then another, until she stood before Kale, her gaze meeting his. The silence was broken only by the soft cadence of her footsteps on the fallen leaves. You have admitted your errors, Kale, she stated, her voice distinct and unwavering. You have confessed your falsehoods. But mere words are insufficient. Actions will forge our destiny. Re-establishing the bond, silence descended upon the gathered wolves as Elara moved to face Kale. The fire painted their eyes with flickering light, mirroring her mingled resolve and deep apprehension. Tension hung heavy, a palpable consequence of Kale's prior transgression and the precarious future it had wrought. She drew a steadying breath, the scent of pine and damp earth grounding her senses. I will attempt to mend the bond, she declared, her voice resonant and clear, cutting through the stillness. But know this, the path will be fraught with difficulty, etched with pain, and its success is far from assured. Kale, visibly drained, offered a slow nod. Having relinquished his alpha status, he stood isolated, his customary dominance replaced by an undeniable vulnerability. His gaze, a silent plea, was a far cry from the arrogant defiance of recent days. He understood the inherent dangers, the looming specter of failure, the agonizing prospect that Elara's efforts might prove futile. Yet, he clung to the desperate hope that her inherent compassion, her unyielding spirit, could somehow bridge the vast chasm he had created. Elara turned inward, her eyes closing as she sought the fractured energy within. She pictured the bond, not as a pristine cord, but as a tattered ruin, its threads unraveling and adrift. Each severed strand represented a deceit, a denial, a moment of shattered trust. To restore it, she must gather those remnants, purify them, and reweave them into a stronger, more resilient whole. She extended her hand towards Kale, palm open in invitation. He hesitated, then tentatively reached out, his fingertips brushing against hers. A jolt, raw and searing, ripped through Elara, a wave of pain that threatened to topple her. She gasped, her body shuddering as she fought to remain upright. The pack's faces swam before her, their anxious murmurs dissolving into a distant drone. The agony was unparalleled, a psychic scream born of a shattered connection, the echo of a bond betrayed. Her very essence felt as if it was being torn asunder, each rent a reflection of Kale's rejection. Clenching her teeth, she refused to yield. She had to be strong for the pack, for Kale, even if he didn't deserve her sacrifice. Diving deeper, she sensed Kale's wolf, once a magnificent creature, now diminished and fragmented. It mirrored Kale's inner turmoil, confusion, fear, and a desperate yearning for the lost connection. Elara reached out, not with force or authority, but with empathy and understanding. She sent calming waves, a soothing balm to its wounded spirit. The wolf responded, a tentative flicker of recognition in its amber eyes. It edged closer, drawn to Elara's warmth, her unwavering light. But as it did, a contrary force pushed back, a sinister presence clinging to the broken threads. Gareth's taint a venomous residue of manipulation and deceit. He had poisoned the connection, twisting Kale's insecurities to his own purposes. Fighting against Gareth's lingering influence was like battling against quicksand. It resisted every advance, clinging to the fractured remnants, trying to sever them completely. Elara felt her strength ebb, the pain escalate. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead, her vision blurring. She could sense the pack's collective dread, their hopes dimming. Kale, sensing her torment, moved nearer, his face a mask of anguish. "Elara, stop," he urged, his voice ragged. "You are hurting yourself. It is not worth it." Elara shook her head, her eyes still shut tight. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice strained to the breaking point. "Not yet. To stop now would be catastrophic, severing any chance of healing, condemning Kale to a slow, agonizing decline. She had to persevere, confront Gareth's darkness, and reclaim their rightful connection. Summoning every last reserve of strength, Elara channeled her energy, focusing it into a single, incandescent beam. She aimed it directly at Gareth's influence, a concentrated blast of pure, unadulterated power. The darkness recoiled, hissing and spitting as it was forced into retreat. A collective gasp rippled through the pack, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. With Gareth's influence momentarily subdued, Elara seized her chance. She reached for the severed strands, gently coaxing them together. The process was grueling. Each connection met with fierce resistance, each mend a fresh wave of torment. But she persisted, her determination fueled by an unwavering belief in truth's power and the possibility of redemption. Slowly, meticulously, the bond began to knit itself back together. Frayed strands intertwined, forming a stronger, more resilient weave. The pain receded, replaced by a fragile warmth, a nascent harmony. Elara felt Kale's wolf respond, its fear diminishing, its spirit slowly healing. But the task was far from complete. The bond remained delicate, vulnerable to further damage. And Gareth's influence, weakened but not vanquished, still lurked, awaiting its opportunity to strike. Elara knew the path ahead would be arduous, but for the first time since Kale's betrayal, a spark of hope ignited within her. The bond was fractured, yes, but not irrevocably broken. With courage, resolve, and a touch of faith, they might just be able to rebuild it, making it stronger and more enduring than before. The road to reconciliation was paved with peril, yet the potential reward a pack healed, an alpha redeemed, and a love refined by betrayal's crucible was worth the battle. The price of pride had been extracted, the power of truth revealed, and now the painstaking restoration of the bond had begun. Divided loyalties, a palpable tension, laced with simmering resentment, filled the clearing as Elara knelt beside Kale. An otherworldly luminescence emanated from her cupped hands, its ebb and flow echoing the frantic rhythm of her pulse. The fragile connection, delicate as a spider's silk, was slowly, painstakingly being rewoven, but this act of restoration unfolded under a cloud of dissent. From the shadowed periphery, Brennan Darkwood's voice, honeyed and persuasive, slithered into the uneasy quiet. "Look at her," he murmured, his words carrying with insidious ease, siphoning off the Alpha's dwindling life force. "Is this the future we envision? Our pack subservient to her?" A wave of disquiet rippled through the assembled wolves. Gareth Stoneclaw, never one to miss an opportunity to fan the flames of discord, rasped out, "She's a Meadowlight, gentle, frail. Her blood will thin ours, diminish our strength." Lysandra Blackwood stood apart, her expression a complex tapestry of conflicting emotions. The sting of Kale's rejection still festered, a burning wound, yet beneath it flickered a nascent fear. Fear of Elara's blossoming power, fear of the implications of her presence, and a reluctant, suppressed acknowledgement. Kale needed her. Brennan approached Lysandra, his gaze, usually cool and calculating, now alight with something resembling triumph. "Lysandra, you were closest to him. You understand the raw power this pack requires. Can you honestly stand idly by while she steals what is rightfully ours?" The word, "steals," hit her like a physical blow. "He made his choice," she snapped, gesturing with a dismissive flick of her wrist towards Kale and Elara. "He chose her above everything," Brennan countered, his tone softening, imbued with false sympathy. "He was weakened, his judgment was impaired. We all witnessed it, the illness, her influence." It clouded his mind. He paused, allowing his words to take root. "We must safeguard him, protect the pack, before it's too late." He extended his hand. Lysandra stared at it, her inner turmoil a tempestuous storm. The years of shared history with Kale, the comradeship of the hunt, the hushed secrets exchanged all overshadowed by Elara's sudden arrival. The unfairness of it stung. With a sigh that resembled a stifled sob, she grasped his hand. "What do you want me to do?" Oblivious to the maneuvering around her, Elara remained focused. Perspiration dotted her brow as she channeled every fiber of her being into repairing the fractured link. She felt Kale's agony, a searing inferno that threatened to consume her. With unwavering resolve, she pushed forward, refusing to let him succumb. Suddenly, a shout shattered the charged air. "Stop her!" Gareth surged forward, a coterie of wolves following him, their eyes blazing with suspicion and hostility. They lunged at Elara, claws extended, determined to sever the connection, to neutralize what they perceived as a dangerous threat. The initial assault, though clumsy and fueled by blind rage, was enough to disrupt the delicate balance of the healing. Elara gasped, as a jolt of pain ripped through her, the fragile bond shuddering violently. A guttural growl erupted from the remaining loyal pack members, who immediately moved to shield Elara. Liam, his face a mask of determination, shoved Gareth back with a strength that sent him sprawling. Maya, her eyes burning with fury, snarled at Lysandra, who stood paralyzed, her face ashen with indecision. "So, you'd betray him like this?" Maya hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. "After all he's sacrificed for this pack?" Lysandra flinched, but Brennan stepped forward, placing a possessive arm around her. "We're not betraying him," he stated, his voice steady but unyielding. "We're rescuing him from himself, from her." The clearing exploded into pandemonium. Wolves collided, teeth and claws flashing, the air thick with the stench of blood and fur. The fight was savage, a desperate display of the divided loyalties that were tearing the pack asunder. Elara, desperately trying to regain her concentration, watched in dismay as the chaos unfolded around her. Each blow struck, each hateful snarl, further damaged the tenuous bond she was fighting to mend. The pain was unbearable, a physical and emotional onslaught. She felt the full force of the pack's animosity, the crushing weight of their expectations, the stark reality of their mistrust. Kale stirred, a moan escaping his lips. His eyelids fluttered open, and he gazed up at the maelstrom of violence. Confusion clouded his features, followed by a spark of understanding, then raw pain. He saw Elara, her face a portrait of anguish, struggling to maintain the connection. He saw the wolves battling, tearing at each other in his name. "Stop," he rasped, his voice weak but carrying a faint echo of his former authority. "End this madness." His plea was drowned out by the roar of conflict. The wolves were too consumed by their rage, their fear, their conflicting allegiances to hear him. Elara, her strength fading, knew she couldn't sustain it much longer. The bond was unraveling, threatening to break completely. And if it did, Kale would be lost forever. Summoning a surge of adrenaline, she pushed herself upright, ignoring the searing pain that coursed through her. She raised her hands, her voice cutting through the din with an authority she hadn't known she possessed. "Enough!" she commanded, her voice amplified by a newfound power. "This has to cease." The fighting wavered, the wolves turning to stare at her, their faces a mixture of shock and defiance. Elara stood tall, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "Kale needs our help," she declared, her voice unwavering. "Not our hatred, not our fear, our help. If we destroy each other, we destroy him. We destroy the pack." Her words hung in the balance, a challenge to their ingrained prejudices, a desperate plea for unity in the face of impending doom. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the ragged breathing of the exhausted wolves and the faint, rhythmic thrum of the healing energy emanating from Elara. The question remained: would they heed her call? Would they cast aside their divided loyalties and embrace the last vestige of hope? Or would they succumb to the encroaching darkness that threatened to engulf them all? United strength Kale's low growl ripped through the charged air, a stark counterpoint to Elara's weakening aura. Each parry, each desperate block against the onslaught, visibly drained her, and the betrayal inflicted by Lysandra now felt like a dull ache compared to the white-knuckle fear gripping him. He would shield her, whatever the cost. He wouldn't suffer another loss. Summoning the wolf, he tasted a raw surge of vitality, a primal tide washing over the lingering pain. He hauled himself upright, legs trembling, yet his gaze sharpened, intensified, reflecting the violet aura that clung to Elara like a second skin. "Enough! Enough!" he bellowed. The wolf's timbre layered beneath his own, halting the fray. Faces turned, etched with shock on Brennan's, a flicker of uncertainty on Lysandra's. Elara's eyes widened, a question blossoming into hope. He moved, a bulwark at her side, a tangible link humming between them. The denied, almost severed connection now their fragile anchor. "Would you corrupt our haven with slaughter? Turn blades against your Alpha?" he challenged, his voice resonating with command. "All for fear spun from lies, whispered by those who crave dominance?" Bremen sneered, his features twisting. "You're pathetic, Kale. Blinded by infatuation. She's an interloper, a meadowlight. She pollutes our blood." "She is my bond," Kale countered, the words ringing with unwavering resolve. They resonated, thick with unspoken meaning. He faced Elara, his gaze softening. "I was wrong. Fear choked me. Fear of what I felt, its implications. Forgive my weakness." A faint smile touched Elara's lips. "There is no need for apologies, Kale," she responded, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned quiet. We all stumble. Redemption lies in correction. Their eyes met, a palpable surge of energy arcing between them, a visible testament to their reforged commitment. The violet light pulsed, bathing the clearing in an unearthly glow. Even Brennan seemed momentarily stunned by the raw power radiating from the pair. "Do you witness it?" Kale asked, turning back to his pack. "The potency of unity, the fortitude found in acceptance. This is our potential, our destiny, not fractured by fear, but strengthened by devotion and understanding." Brennan's grating laughter shattered the moment. "Understanding? She drains you, Kale. A puppet master pulling your strings." "I am not a puppet," Kale snapped, steel lacing his words. "I am choosing to stand with the woman who unveiled true strength, choosing a future where our pack isn't defined by prejudice, but flourishes free from fear." Drawing his blade, the steel caught the violet light, blazing brilliantly. Elara stepped forward, hands wreathed in glowing meadowlight energy, a unified front against the dissenting Praj. Voices. "Who stands with us?" Kale's roar echoed through the woods. Silence hung heavy, then a figure emerged. Gareth, his face a landscape of inner conflict, yet resolve burned bright in his eyes. "I stand with Kale," he announced, his voice clear and strong. "I had doubts, but I see the truth now. Survival demands unity, and that means accepting Elara." One by one, others followed. Some motivated by unwavering fealty to Kale, others drawn by a genuine belief in Elara's vision of peace, others still swayed by the sheer force of power before them. The momentum was shifting. Lysandra remained rooted at Bremen's side, a mask of defiance firmly in place. "You condemn us all, Kale," she hissed. "She will be your undoing. Then I will face that end with her," Kale declared, his voice unwavering as stone. The battle reignited, charged with a new current. Those siding with Kale and Elara fought with renewed zeal, fueled by nascent hope and an unprecedented sense of cohesion. Kale fought with the honed fury of regret and determination, his movements a dance of lethal grace. Elara mended shattered bodies and lifted flagging spirits, her touch a balm of solace and strength. They moved as one, their energies intertwined, creating a synergistic whole. Kale's physical prowess augmented by Elara's restorative touch, and her meadowlight shielded by his unwavering defense. Their bond, a tangible force, pushing back the encroaching shadows and galvanizing their allies. Desperate, Brennan singled out Elara, knowing she was the linchpin to Kale's power. But Kale was a whirlwind of protection, intercepting blows, deflecting attacks, an unbreakable barrier. "You will not touch her," he roared, eyes burning like twin suns. He lunged at Brennan, his sword a silver streak. The Alphas collided, their battle a maelstrom of raw power and honed skill. Simultaneously, Elara focused her energy, expanding her healing touch into a shared resonance. She brushed against the minds of those fighting alongside them, sharing her strength, hope, and vision. A future where meadowlights and darkwoods coexisted harmoniously, where strength stemmed not from lineage, but from loyalty and empathy. The effect was instantaneous. Those touched by Elara surged forward, imbued with newfound purpose. They fought with a ferocity that caught even themselves by surprise, pushing back the dissenters and creating a crucial opening for Kale. Seizing the moment, Kale disarmed Brennan, his sword skittering across the earth. He stood over his fallen adversary, his chest heaving, his gaze a mixture of contempt and pity. "It doesn't have to end like this, Brennan," Kale said, his voice raw. "We can rise above this hatred." Brennan spat, the gesture of venomous refusal. "Never. I will never embrace her." Kale sighed. He was beyond reach, lost in his own bitterness. Turning to the pack, his gaze swept across their faces. "The fighting ends now," he declared, his voice ringing with command. "Those who stand with us stay. Those who choose to depart may go. But there will be no more bloodshed. Let peace find root here." Silence descended, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees. The battle concluded, yet the war for the heart of the pack remained. Kale looked at Elara, his heart overflowing with gratitude and love. Together they had faced the encroaching darkness and emerged stronger, more united than ever. Their journey, he knew, had just truly begun. A new beginning the morning after the cataclysm arrived, pristine. The atmosphere scoured clean by the prior night's magical and physical strife. An easily disturbed tranquility draped over the territory, as delicate as frost on the eaves. From the familiar dais where he'd once spurned Elara, a memory that seared his conscience, Kale surveyed the assembled pack. Exhaustion lined their faces, mingled with apprehension and nascent optimism. He drew a breath, filling his lungs with the scent of evergreens and damp earth, a welcome change from the coppery reek of spilled blood. "I stand before you," Kale began, his tone infused with newfound humility. "Not as the perfect alpha you once perceived, but as an imperfect wolf burdened by grievous errors. My judgment was clouded by arrogance and dread, a path that nearly led to our ruin." He paused, his gaze drawn to Elara, positioned at the edge of the throng, her expression an enigma. "I publicly refuted the tie between Elara and I. I shunned her, convinced her Meadowlight gifts represented frailty. How wrong I was." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Many looked away, guilt evident, recalling their part in Elara's alienation. Kale pressed on, his voice gaining power. "Her strength resides not in raw power, but in her empathy, her fortitude, and her unwavering faith in justice. She ministered to our injured. She fought bravely beside us, and revealed the essence of unity. I owe her amends, not merely as your alpha, but as one who inflicted deep personal harm." He descended the platform, each step towards Elara deliberate, laden with regret. Halting before her, their eyes locked. "Elara, I offer my sincerest apology. I know that words cannot erase the pain I inflicted, but I vow to dedicate my life to earning your absolution and confidence." A heavy silence filled the air, broken only by the soughing of wind through the trees. Elara searched his face, her gaze probing, seeking any trace of deceit. The weight of her suffering was etched in the hollows beneath her eyes, in the slight tremor of her hands. At last she spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "Your apology is acknowledged, Kale. However, trust isn't a gift freely dispensed, it's earned through actions. You face a considerable undertaking." A pause, then, "Not only with me, but with the entire pack. Your choices have created division and distrust. Restoring that will require both time and genuine devotion." Kale inclined his head, accepting the truth of her words. "Understood. I am prepared to do whatever is needed." He turned to address the pack, his declaration resonating with renewed resolve. "Our work starts today. We shall reevaluate our customs, challenge our biases, and forge a pack where every wolf, without regard to abilities or origin, is valued and esteemed." His eyes sought Elara's, a silent plea for support. I cannot accomplish this alone. Your aid is crucial, Elara. I need your guidance." Elara stepped forward, radiating a quiet strength. "Then let us begin," she stated, her voice ringing with clarity and strength, "by addressing the antiquated laws that have nurtured prejudice within our society." She detailed specific policies, concentrating on equal rights and possibilities for all members, regardless of parentage or skill. Some voices rose in opposition, clinging to outdated traditions, but Kale, resolute by Elara's side, refuted their arguments with clear reason and unyielding conviction. He admitted his past failures, conceding that his allegiance to tradition had blinded him to the pack's embedded inequities. Elder Rowan shuffled Cod forward, steadying himself on his staff. "The great bond has frayed," he croaked, his voice gravelly but audible across the space. Kale's rejection of Elara severed the connection, leaving him susceptible. His strength diminished, his decisions faltered. Only through embracing the bond can he truly recover and lead this pack. He fixed Kale with ancient, knowing eyes. "You must learn to draw power not solely from yourself, but from your connection with Elara." Kale recognized the elder's wisdom. He understood that the bond transcended a mere mystical link. It was a fount of strength, direction, and equilibrium. His gaze met Elara's, his heart a mixture of apprehension and burgeoning hope. He knew rebuilding their relationship would be a prolonged and demanding task, but he was prepared to accept that challenge. In the ensuing weeks, Kale and Elara labored ceaselessly to enact the new pack protocols. They convened open assemblies, listened to the anxieties of the constituents, and addressed their reservations with sincerity and understanding. Elara employed her Meadowlight abilities to mend not only physical wounds, but also the lingering emotional damage of the past. She conducted seminars to educate the pack on the importance of diversity and inclusion, stressing the power derived from appreciating their differences. Humbled by his brush with disaster, Kale assiduously sought Elara's advice on every judgment. He trained himself to listen, to consider alternative teprene, viewpoints, and to appreciate the contributions of those he had previously dismissed. Alongside Elara, he engaged in extensive training, refining his combat expertise and learning to channel her Meadowlight energy into his own offensive maneuvers. Their rapport grew stronger, the bond deepening with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the firmament in fiery hues, Kale and Elara stood together on a ridge overlooking the territory. The air carried the fragrant perfume of wildflowers and the soft hush of the breeze. Kale turned to Elara, his eyes reflecting gratitude and affection. "Thank you, Elara," he said, his voice softened with emotion, "for your forgiveness, for your fortitude, and for your enduring belief in me." Elara smiled, her eyes alight in the twilight. "We still have far to go, Kale," she replied, "but we are moving in the right direction. Together, we can create a better future for our people." She reached for his hand, her touch sending a surge of energy through him. The bond, once ruptured and broken, now throbbed with a radiant, healing energy. The future remained uncertain, but as they stood there, their hands clasped, they confronted it together, united in their dedication to crafting a new dawn for the Ironwood pack.